So this is Danny Flexon, to be joined by my good friend and boxing journalist, PED expert. He wears a number of hats, and apparently joining us from outer space today, Gabe Montoya. How you doing, mate?
I'm doing all right, man. I'm like I said before, I'm taking a global view, considering my country just decided to set the world on fire by electing a fascist. So I'm kind of just, in the ethos, just taking a breath.
Fascist indeed. Start as we mean to go on. You might not have quite so vicious barbs reserved for last night's big fight, if we can even call it that, but I'm sure you've got plenty to say. Jake Paul defeated Mike Tyson, won pretty much every round in what was quite a tedious fight, and for a lot of people, quite sad to watch as well. What were your immediate reflections?
Well, I tried not to watch the fight. I went to because I don't, it's a very American tradition, but I don't partake in public lynchings. And that's basically what this was. And I know people will say, well, don't bring race into it, but it's boxing. We invented the color line. We invented the phrase, the great white hope. And to me, what Jake Paul is kind of the inverse of what John L. Sullivan, who denied us a chance at having Peter Jackson, the Black Prince, who was, I think, he had beaten an English champion, he was the Australian champion, had beaten the black, at the time called the Negro champion, but John L. Sullivan wouldn't fight him because he was black. But John L. Sullivan would say, I can lick any son of a bitch in the room. And he would go on barnstorming tours on trains with an entourage across the country, fighting blacksmiths and local bartenders, the local tough guy. But he wouldn't give Peter Jackson a shot at the title. And Jake Paul is what the writer Tom Nichols calls the end of expertise, talking about the internet age and how everybody's an expert. And so what Jake Paul has done is he's that bartender or that local tough guy beating up professional boxers. Only they're in Tyson's case, 20 years retired, and Shotsky when they ended, to use an ugly term in boxing. Mike Tyson had lost in 2005 twice, to, I think it was 2004, then 2005, stopped by Danny Williams, and then quit basically, and was stopped against Danny McBride. He said his knee basically went out. So we knew that at 58 years old, yeah, it's not bodybuilding, it's boxing. His body looked great. There was no drug testing for the fight. I just think, Jake put on all that weight. I've heard rumors that he had Memo Heredia in his camp. So I'd like to see him in a year-round VADA testing before I think that he's clean. So for me, I took my wife out. It was a rainy, beautiful night in Los Angeles with a full moon. I took my wife out to dinner, and lo and behold, the restaurant was playing the fight. I mean, it was everywhere. You couldn't get away from it. So I saw the Barrios fight out of the corner of my eye. And then when I missed the Serrano fight, and I was like, all right, you know what? I'm going to watch this thing. And Tyson looked about 200 years old. And my wife walked out of the room. And I was like, yeah, this, as I said to somebody that was reaching out to me, it literally goes against everything that I fought for while I spent 12 years as a boxing reporter and podcaster. And I just turned it off. It made me really disgusted to see Andre Ward and Lennox Lewis and Evander Holyfield and Sugar Ray Leonard, all these legit boxing people coming together to celebrate this lynching of Mike Tyson, and pretending that it's real and treating Jake Paul like he's real, when he's just a troll. And this outlet, I exclude from it because you guys do real journalism. And full disclosure, I used to work for you guys doing real journalism. Uh, but all the clickbait journalists out there that kind of wish this fight into into existence shamed themselves and shamed the sport.
Do you feel it harms the sport in a longer term aspect?
I think anything that degrades it, and every Jake Paul fight does, hurts the sport. It confuses people and makes them think, sort of like CompuBox makes people think that that's how we keep score in boxing. Uh, Jake Paul makes people think that this is real. I mean, I was on Sunset Boulevard. I live in Los Angeles, and yesterday, and there's a huge Mike Tyson billboard. Like, why don't promoters spend that kind of money? But this is Netflix. They want us to watch their channel, their streaming network, and they spent $20 million on an old ancient Mike Tyson to sacrifice him to Jake Paul. But they were just this year in being struck by the Screen Actors Guild, my industry that I work in now, because they don't want to, give people residuals. They're robbing people of their livelihood, but they can spend money on this spectacle to draw people to Netflix. It's disgusting. And it hurts the sport. It's not good for the sport in any way. And as much people can say, well, he's helped out female boxers or the other fighters get paid. I don't know, put pressure on the promoters to pay these people better and to put on women's boxing. I think Jake is sort of like why, he's a part of this ecosphere. He's a Trump voter. He's a cryptocurrency guy, which is really just exists to destroy the dollar and crash our economy. Um, he's sort of like the fascist Trump, where he says certain things that are true in order to close, to disguise his lies. And what Jake does is he surrounds himself with real boxers to make himself seem like a real boxer when he's fighting a 58-year-old man.
Do you have any sympathy for Tyson in this though? Because he's not exactly a useful idiot in this. He knows what he's doing. He's been around the sport a long time. He's been paid a lot of money. He didn't get hurt by the looks of it. I mean, it's not a fair match, and I have sympathy for the sport. Do you have any for
Yeah.
Tyson directly?
Um, I feel bad for him that he feels he needs to do this. I almost got the sense seeing his interviews, that one with the young girl where he talked about not having ego, it felt less like a Buddha and more like a guy that hates himself and is just thinks that this humiliation is what he deserves, but he'll take the money if they'll give it to me. I just was saddened by the whole thing. I became a Tyson fan the night that he lost to Buster Douglas.
Hmm.
I wasn't a big Tyson fan heading into that. I appreciated his skills and everything, but the story of Tyson is when somebody stood up to him, he lost or bit them until he got disqualified as a fighter. I don't really look back at him and say he was the greatest of all time because that's Ali. That's a guy that fought all his contemporaries, avenged losses, and proved his greatness that way. Fought on way too long, like Tyson did for the money. So I have sympathy for him as I have sympathy for all boxers except Jake Paul.
And talking of Jake Paul, before we move on from the subject, do you ever see him fighting a genuine contender at any point?
No, I mean, he lost to Tommy Fury, who's not
Hmm.
very good, and then immediately went back to pulling people out of mothballs and calling it an accomplishment. So he's, as Larry Merchant referred to, I think it was Margarito, but I think it's really talking about the ring. The ring is a truth machine, and the truth about Jake Paul has already been revealed.
Fair enough. Now we move on to someone else for whom he would claim the truth about himself has been revealed. The UCAD and the British Boxing Board of Control may disagree. That is, of course, Conor Benn, who revealed last week or the week before it, maybe now, that he has been cleared of any wrongdoing, in his words, and this was endorsed by Eddie Hearn, his promoter. Perhaps no surprise there,
Yeah.
um, by a national anti-doping panel here in the UK, and he will now be able to resume his career. I mean, he'd still have to apply for a British Boxing Board of Control license should he want to fight in the UK, or apply to compete as a foreign license holder, but the board would still reserve the right to decline that. What did you make of this latest news? UCAD have obviously confirmed that the case has been dismissed by the anti-doping panel, but they do reserve the right to appeal. I think they've got around another week to do so.
Yeah, they have the till the November 21st, I believe, something like that, right? Or it was like
Yeah,
21 days past the
yeah,
ruling.
correct.
He still hasn't taken responsibility for what was in his body. Anti-doping code, WADA code, all of them follow the strict liability, which means that an athlete is responsible for what's in their body. He's found loopholes with this entity that keeps clearing him, saying that they had an issue with WADA doing the testing, and then there's maybe a problem with the results, and the rules of, I think, UCAD say that we can't know what's in that report unless Conor Benn releases it. So release it and let us know that you're actually clean. He hasn't given a reason why he tested positive twice over a 5-week period for a drug that uh, athletes across many sports, professional and amateur, test positive for. And it's sort of like Meldonian when WADA banned Meldonian, and you saw people test positive for it from amateur hockey players in Canada all the way to professional tennis players. Everybody's doing this drug because it works. I know a guy that competes in a sport that as an amateur where they don't do any testing, and he uses it and says it feels it works. So to me, this whole what the WBC did, I think really confused things, focusing on one test and exonerating him because of the egg excuse, and then he was like, "No, that's not what I did." Um, I think Eddie Hearn and Conor Benn have venue shopped and found the place that will give them the loophole to say that I'm clean. That doesn't mean that he's clean. That doesn't mean that it's no fault of his own. It just means he's found the right lawyers to get the job done.
We don't know at this stage if UCAD or the board or both will appeal. But given he's been out of the ring for some time, the board and UCAD, neither of which are known for having great financial reserves, is there a good chance here, as many are speculating, that they will decide discretion is the better part of valor and move on rather than challenge this once again?
I don't know. I would have to know them better as people. But I feel like the head of the BBOC or BBBOC uh, doesn't like this situation. Just hearing that interview he did with like Talk Sport, and so I think for the betterment of the sport, this is a precedent here where this guy's found a loophole to get around everything. I keep hearing Conor Benn talk about I'm an advocate for clean sport. Well, my dude, you signed up to be in the clean boxing program. You signed up for VADA. They caught you. Um, and now all you've done is trash everybody and the whole anti-doping system and muddied the waters and made it easier for the next guy that tests positive to get away with it. How is that being an advocate for clean sport? It's pure hypocrisy. Um, and I think Eddie Hearn's going to do what he needs to do for for his boxer. He's a promoter. His wares are human beings, and if they're not fighting, he doesn't make money off of them. So of course he's going to say whatever. I'm never surprised by promoters who do that. He falls in a long line with Richard Schaefer and others who will denigrate everybody around them to get their goals done. Um, but yeah, I think it's bad for the sport. I don't think Connor should be given a license until he fully explains what went down, releases all the reports, and lets the public go through that. Reporters go through that, and UCAD and the board uh, uh, look through those things and decide from there.
With that in mind, theoretically, what evidence could Conor Benn present or share that you would accept as proof of innocence or, as he says, clearance of any wrongdoing?
Um, Show me where the protocols screwed him 2 times over 5 weeks. Break down how these Olympic testing labs did him wrong, and show attack the test, but in a legitimate way, and show the science that how you got there. Show evidence that the protocol is maybe somebody screwed with the sample. The burden of proof is on him. The tests are the tests, and yeah, I think that would go a long way. But but all of the smoke and mirrors is not convincing to me. I've just I wrote 75 pieces on performance enhancing drugs. I've talked to people who've given people drugs. I've talked to the people who've designed tests to catch the cheats. I'm not easily convinced by smoke and mirrors.
You said this makes it easier, in theory, for future drug cheats to get away with it. Is that a serious issue in terms of the rise of drug usage in boxing? That if someone is able to circumvent the law rules, and we're not saying Conor Benn's definitely done that, but if that is the case, is that a real concern for boxing in the future? In that, more people try this now because it's worth the risk.
Yeah, I mean, well, I think that there's not people tend to think that there's a steroid era, and I just think it's an ongoing thing. Greenies after World War II they used to give amphetamine to fighter pilots on both sides. It started with the Nazis, and the Americans did the same thing, and it came back to baseball. And guys did greenies for years, all the way into the 60s. So I can't, there was only boxing and baseball at that time. Uh, I can't believe that it was in one sport and not the sport that had a 15-round fights and dudes that fought often and were super ripped. Then you get in, the drug testing didn't start till 2000, 2001 in Nevada. And immediately they caught, Fernando Vargas is the first boxer. They'd caught, I think, an MMA fighter right before that. Um, and you look at the 90s and you look at the physiques, you look at Evander Holyfield, who was caught, not caught, but was entangled in his own scandal, the whole Evan Fields thing. um, you just trust your eyes and go, that was the golden age of steroids in baseball. Why wouldn't it be in every other sport, but particularly boxing, the most dangerous sport? um, so yeah, I think, I don't know if it encourages other people to cheat, but what it does is set a pathway for them to get away with it.
And just last of all, certainly not least, we found out, I suppose it was confirmed officially around a week ago now, that Turki Alalshikh, arguably the most powerful figure in boxing today, for better or
Mhm.
worse, has bought the Ring magazine from Golden Boy Promotions. What impact do you think this will have, not just on the sport, but on journalism in boxing?
I think it further degrades it. I think we all stopped. And full disclosure, while Oscar De La Hoya's Golden Boy Promotions, or at least, Oscar De La Hoya owned the ring, and like a subsidiary of his, a business of his, owned the ring. I wrote for them a few articles, but it was like breaking drug testing for Tyson Fury Wilder one, which no one on the Al Heyman side wanted disclosed, and so I disclosed it. And I wrote like a guest column in Doug Fisher's mailbag. So I've taken money from that entity. Um, but that said, I think it degrades it. I mean, look, Turki Al-Sheikh is the right-hand man to Mohammed bin Salman, the crown prince, there in Saudi Arabia. If you read the book Blood and Oil, it talks about how MBS came to power, essentially kidnapping other members of the royal family and putting them up in a hotel and shaking them down for billions of dollars. So when Turki Al-Sheikh says, we've bought the ring, they put up a graphic of a guy sitting on a throne with a crown on his head. The Saudi is a monarchy, and says it's a new era, and that they're going to allow the magazine to have editorial independence. Um, I just kind of go, yeah, I don't believe that for a second. I think this is all part of their sports washing operation, where they're buying up different sports, and they're kind of feathering the nest for what comes next. Um, the fact that he hired Rick Reno, I used to work for Rick Reno for about a week. He used to run Boxing Scene.
Sure.
When I think of that editorial independence, um, I worked for Rick Reno during the spring of 2012 when I broke like 5 stories about drugs in 6 weeks. And I was, a hot property. So he hired me on to be his West Coast editor. But I was breaking stories about Golden Boy. And so we got a call from Richard Schaefer, who was running Golden Boy, and basically said that I was going to be blackballed for writing these stories, and that he shouldn't hire me because I won't be able to do a job for him because none of the fighters would be allowed to talk to me. So Rick fired me. Like, I had that job a week. So if people are thinking Rick Reno is going to uh, push back on editorial comments by Turki Al-Sheikh or editorial direction, um, I got another Mike Tyson versus Jake Paul fight to sell you.
Hmm. What about the observers out there who say, yes, we can't guarantee independence, but the ring previously was owned by a major promoter. The integrity of the title was already compromised.
Yeah, I think it was. I think that, Oscar, he bought it for 7 million. He sold it for a reported 10 million. That's according to him. I don't know if he got more, or 10 million plus we'll pick up a bunch of your fights. I don't know what the deal is. Um, but I just think everyone capitulating to a monarchy is not a great idea. I mean, this is a country that jails and kills a high level of, high amount of journalists. They jail their own citizens for tweeting bad things about the government. That's a real thing. You can look that up. Um, so the idea that they're buying a publication in the U.S. and gonna, I think they bought Fight Facts as well, so they're gonna be doing their own rankings, their own ratings, and kind of consolidating things. I mean, people talk about, this is gonna be great. We're only gonna have one champion again. We're gonna know who the champion is, but fighters are poor people trying to make money. They're literally putting their bodies on the line to get out of their situation. Four belts means four avenues for cash for them. Because the politics of boxing and the ratings are not exactly transparent. There's four different avenues for these guys to move up and have a title. I think undisputed, this era that we're in is very exciting. Seeing people go for that, and going to a UFC style model is going to basically be a monarchy where Turki Alalshikh decides who the fighters are that get to go to the top. And we've seen already signs of that with the way he talks about Canelo, the way he talked about Tim Tszyu. So two, big time, a rising star in the sport, although he's in a rebuilding phase now, Tim Tszyu, but Canelo, is the biggest star in the sport and is given, over his body over 60 times to the sport to get where he's at. And I think the whole thing is very alarming. But it also shows how little these promoters really care about the fighters and really care about the sport. It's about their bottom dollar, and they're making a lot more money than they've ever made. So yeah, I think the Golden Boy was always kind of tainted once Oscar bought it. And the fact that he sold it to a monarchy kind of shows how much he actually cared about its brand.
How much difference do you expect to see from the editorial content of the ring, both in print and online? Because apparently print is going to be resurrected in the UK and the US.
Yeah, because everybody's really into buying magazines anymore. Uh, I think just beware of people selling you nostalgia. Make America great again is a nostalgic slogan that takes us back to a mythical time that never existed. And so this, I think, is also here. I'll give you these magazines. Remember how good it used to be? And everybody gets really happy. Mike Tyson, Jake Paul was mass psychosis and mass nostalgia combined into one thing. Um, so, I'm happy that journalists are getting jobs, but I'm wondering, what they have to do to get those jobs. Do they have to call him His Excellency every time they see him? Because the United States, until November 5th, was a Western democracy. So, a constitutional republic. We don't have kings. We had a war about it. And now all of a sudden everybody's saying, Your Excellency, can I have a job? I think it degrades journalism, but again, present company excluded, it would be very hard to degrade boxing journalism further than it already is, but they're going to try. I don't think there's going to be any sort of Tom Hauser exposés where he used to write about HBO in the ring about, Turkey Alalshikh and the monarchy. I think it'll all be just kind of an extension of the public relations of Riyadh season, praising the kingdom, praising all the fighters, and isn't this great what this fight happened? But the end, those days of the ring exposing like rankings, scandals, those days are gone. I could be wrong. I would love to be wrong about it.
I would love you to be wrong about it also, but there are obviously several areas for concern, and we'll watch as it plays out with a critical eye, as always.
Yeah, man.
Gabe, really appreciate your time, especially as you are currently out of this world, quite literally. But no, it's really good of you to join us, and we should do it again soon because I'm sure the next controversy is just around the corner, unfortunately.
Hey, my pleasure, Danny. Yeah, it's boxing. Blink and something bad's going to happen. But there's also, a glorious fight last night between Amanda Serrano and Katie